One of the most important techniques professional music producers use is referencing their tracks to commercially successful tracks of the same genre. If you're working in stereo, this is very easy to do. All you really need to do is find appropriate reference tracks and then download them from the source of your choice, which can be a streaming service or another service that allows you to download music. If you're working in Dolby Atmos, things are a lot more complicated, and the reason for that is that there are currently no services out there that allow you to download Dolby Atmos master files. What the channel have to do in Dolby Atmos is you have to set up a separate monitoring system that is usually connected to your computer via HDMI. It takes in Dolby Atmos in the form of Dolby Digital Plus with joint object coding, which is a special encoding format, and converts it into something that is then played back in your speaker system. Now, this is expensive to set up. This is also not particularly straightforward to set up. So the question is there an easier way to do that? And surprisingly, the answer to the question is yes. There is actually an easier way to do that. And this is what I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you how to use Apple Music in order to bring Dolby Atmos or to reference Dolby Atmos directly in your DAW without any additional expensive hardware. So let's get started. But first of all, hello everybody. In case you're new here, my name is Michael Wagner. I'm a digital media educator with more than 30 years of experience in higher education. And on this channel, I talk about digital media, game design, and spatial audio. Today about how to bring Dolby Atmos into your digital audio workstation. If any of those topics interest you, I invite you to subscribe or join our Discord community. Invite link is in the description below, or there's also a QR code here somewhere. Before I continue, there are two comments I need to make. First of all, what I'm going to show you today only works on a Mac. We do need Apple Music, and we need a couple of features that are only available in the Mac operating system. If you are on Windows, there are ways in order to get commercial Dolby Atmos into your digital audio workstation. However, those are all hacks. So what I would suggest is that you join our Discord community. We had a little bit of a discussion on how to do that, and there you will actually find instructions on how you can actually get Dolby Atmos music into your Windows-based digital audio workstation, but in this video I'm going to focus on a Mac exclusively. The second comment I need to make is that the feature that I'm going to use today is an undocumented feature on the Mac. So if you go through the documentation on the Dolby website or through the Apple documentation, especially Apple Music, you're not going to find that referenced anywhere. It is indeed undocumented. We actually had a little bit of a discussion in our Discord server whether or not to call this an undocumented feature or a hack. I personally think it's more of an undocumented feature because it has been around for quite some time, and there have actually been articles written about this. I'm going to leave a link in the description below to an article by a production expert where they first kind of explained that over a year ago. So the fact that this has been around for quite some time and actually went through an entire upgrade cycle of the Mac operating system makes me believe that even though it is an undocumented feature, it's in there intentionally. However, be aware that because it is undocumented, there is no guarantee that it actually works on your particular system, and there's also no guarantee that this will actually stick around forever. So it is very well possible that in one of the next upgrades of the Mac operating system, this feature is taken out. However, I have very strong opinions about what would happen if they actually take out that feature, and I'm going to talk about that towards the end of the video. But with that being said, let's get right into how to actually get Dolby Atmos into your digital audio workstation. Now, there are a couple of things that we need. First of all, we do need Apple Music, and we need an Apple Music subscription that includes spatial audio, because otherwise we obviously cannot play spatial audio. Now, in this video, I'm not going to play any commercial tracks simply because I want to avoid getting copyright strikes, or at least you're not going to hear anything commercial that I'm going to play on my system. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a track that is provided by Dolby Labs. If you go into Apple Music and you search for functional testing, what you will actually find is a number of tracks that you can use in order to test your Dolby Atmos setup, and this is essentially what we're going to use and what you're going to hear. Now, the basic idea of what we're going to do is that if your Mac is connected to a 7.1.4 speaker system, for example, through an external audio interface, Apple Music will actually recognize that and will decode Dolby Atmos into 7.1.4. So you don't need to have a receiver connected to HDMI in order to make that work. You can actually work with a regular 7.1.4 speaker system connected through a regular audio interface. Now we are going to use that in order to pipe that audio back into our software. So what we're going to do is instead of sending it to an external audio interface, we're going to send it through a virtual device so that we can reroute that in the Mac into a digital audio workstation or any other standalone application that can take 7.1.4. Now, there are a couple of options that you have if you want to create a virtual device that can take in multi-channel audio and kind of pass it through to another application. The one I'm going to use is called Loopback. I'm going to leave links in the description below. So let me just open up Loopback here. Where do we have it? Loopback. It's a favorite one. A lot of people are using that. And what I've essentially set up here is a more or less pass-through device that takes in a 16-channel audio and passes it through to a 16-channel output. Now, because we are using 7.1.4, we would technically only need 12 channels, but this is a standard device that I'm using for many different purposes, so I just have a 16 channel. So essentially what you need is you need to have at least 12 channels available to you. Now, this doesn't need to be loopback. There are a couple of other options. You could, for example, you could even use the Dolby Atmos bridge, for example, or you could use the Pro Tools bridge, or there are a couple of other options that you have as well. But loopback works very well, and that actually works perfectly fine. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to set the main output to be this loopback device. So I'm going to go into the output settings, and I'm going to essentially send that into our loopback device. Where is it? Here we have it, loopback 16 channels. And once again, we can send that into other bridge devices as well. So we could, for example, send it through a Pro Tools audio bridge or through the Dolby audio bridge, or if you have the Embody Immerse Virtual Studio, you could also send it, for example, through the Immerse audio bridge. Whatever you have, it just needs to have at least 12 channels. That's essentially everything that we need. So we need to send that through the loopback device. And then we need to tell the system that this is actually a 7.1.4 speaker layout, or this has a 7.1.4 speaker layout. So what we need to do is we need to go into the utilities, and in utilities we need to open up the audio MIDI setup. And in the audio MIDI setup, we have to go through to our loopback device. Where is it? Here is the loopback device. And in this settings, we need to click here on configure speakers. So if we click on that, it essentially opens up our speaker setups. And what we want is we want to tell our Mac that what we have here is indeed a 7.1.4 Atmos surround setup. And this will then tell the system to decode any Dolby Atmos that it receives into 7.1.4 and send that into that loopback device. So once we have done that, the system now knows that we have a 7.1.4 system, 7.1.4 speaker layout connected. So the final thing that we need to go into the music settings, and in the music settings we need to tell Apple Music that we want to enable Dolby Atmos. So in the playback settings, here we are. We need to go into the settings and select Dolby Atmos, set that to automatic. Now, this is actually important that you set that to automatic. If you set that to always on, it will default to binaural rendering, and this is not what we want. We want to actually kind of trick the system into decoding that into 7.1.4, and that for whatever reason only happens if you set that to automatic. Now, one thing to be aware of, that this is sometimes a little fiddly, so sometimes it actually happens that you change that and it doesn't recognize that you are working with the 7.1.4. Sometimes what you need to do is you need to kind of switch that back and forth. It's almost as if you would have to shake it a little in order to wake up. But be aware that this might not work immediately, but once it actually starts working, it is fairly consistent and it works constantly. You might also kind of reboot your system. So kind of, and some people have actually reported that they never got it to work, but most of the people that I've talked to actually managed to get that work in 1 or 2 tries, and it actually just works perfectly fine. So we've set that to automatic. And that essentially means that if I now play any track, it should actually already recognize that I have a 7.1.4 output. Now, currently this is not connected to any speaker, so you're not going to hear anything. But if I'm playing any Dolby Atmos music, so let me, for example, play that classic Aha track. essentially, you will see that it already recognized that as a 7.1.4 Atmos device, and it's already passing through the audio. And all we now really need to do is we need to take that 7.1.4 audio and send that back into a digital audio workstation or another application that can take in 7.1.4. And this is what we're going to do. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to send the output of Loopback into a standalone instance of Virtuoso. Now, for those of you who have never heard about Virtuoso, Virtuoso is a very nice plugin / standalone application that can render multi-channel audio in a way that simulates the experience that you have in an actual music studio. So it's a binaural rendering engine that includes head tracking and everything. And it did a couple of videos about those things. I'm probably going to leave a link to one of those videos in the description below. And this will essentially allow us to see if we're actually getting a full immersive Dolby Atmos experience. So let's open up Virtuoso. And where do we have Virtuoso? Here we have Virtuoso. And once that has opened up, it's probably going to take a minute. Here we have it. We need to set it to 7.1.4 because once again, that is what we are going to get. And then we need to go into the options, and in the options in the audio settings, we need to select the appropriate input and output devices. The input is going to be our Loopback device. So this is the 16-channel Loopback device, and the output, and I'm going to change that to my Rodecaster so that you can actually hear what I'm hearing. Then that should actually be everything. So the next thing I really need to do is I just need to kind of put on my headphones and let's have a listen on if we actually hear anything. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go once again into the functional testing in order to make sure that we don't really get any copyright strikes. And I'm going to use the Dolby Atmos channels 7.1.4 setup. And let's just play one and see if that actually matches.
Left, right, center, left surround, right surround, left rear surround, right rear surround, left top front, right top front, left top rear, right top rear.
So this seems to work perfectly fine. So everything is okay. So the last thing really that I need to do is I now need to add head tracking. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the Waves head tracker today. Now, I do recommend the Subway head tracker usually because that's a very, very nice head tracker. But, you know, kind of with the latest iteration of Virtuoso, they actually included the ability to use the Waves NX head tracker on a Mac. And why not use Waves NX? It's a nice kind of wireless head tracker. So let's do that. So in order to prepare that, what we need to do is we need to go into the settings of Virtuoso and we need to enable the head tracking. This is already done here, and we need to select NX OSC. NX OSC is a little application that essentially takes in the information that comes from the Waves NX head tracker and converts that into OSC messages that can be then read by Virtuoso. So the final thing that we need to do is we need to load up NX OSC in order to convert the signal from the head tracker. Where do we have NX OSC? I have way too many applications here. Here we have NX OSC. And then I need to do two things, obviously. I need to turn on the Waves NX head tracker. So let me do that. So it starts blinking blue, and then let's press the connect button, and it sees the tracker, choose the device, and it essentially should at that point get the information. Yes, it does. So yaw, pitch, and roll. And the last thing I really need to do is I need to put that onto my headphones. So let's do that. And here we are. And then let's reset that. And once I've reset that, I should now be able to have a full immersive impression of my Dolby Atmos in essentially completely software-based. So let's play once again our little kind of track here.
Right, center, left surround, right surround, left rear surround, right rear surround, left front height, right front height, Left rear height. Right rear height.
And the LFE. And everything works fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play a little bit of music. Now, once again, you're not going to hear anything. I'm going to turn off the music in this particular case in order to make sure that we don't really have any copyright strikes. I just want to make sure that everything works fine. So let me just go back and play the Aha song here. And that works surprisingly well. So this essentially now allows me to really monitor. This allows me to really monitor Dolby Atmos completely immersively without any expensive hardware. All I really needed was a couple of pieces of hardware. Some of that is free, some of them cost a little bit of money, and then I needed a head tracker, and I was ready to go. So the next thing that I'm going to do is, instead of routing it into Virtuoso, I'm going to route that back into a digital audio workstation so that I can use it as a reference track in that digital audio workstation. Now, for that purpose, any digital audio workstation that is multi-channel capable is fine. I'm going to use Reaper because, why not? Now, I've already closed Virtuoso and I've opened up Reaper here. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to tell Reaper that it should take in the Loopback device as an input device. So I'm going to go into the settings, and in the settings, here we are, the settings, I'm going to select the input device to be the Loopback 16 channels. And then I'm also going to make sure that I have a separate output device, because I actually want to send that audio to the actual output that I'm using and not back into Loopback. So I'm going to click on allow use different output in input and output devices, and I'm going to choose the Rodecaster Pro here in order to make sure that I'm actually getting the audio to you. And then essentially I just need to add a track. So let's just add a new track, and this new track is going to be an 12 channel track, because we want to have 7.1.4 enabled here. And we are going to set the input. Let me just enable that. And the input is going to be 12 channel, the first 12 channels. And then let's also make sure that we have the master track set up correctly. That needs to be a 12 channels track as well. And then essentially what I'm going to do is I need to decode the audio on the master track. So let me just add a decoder, and I'm going to use Virtuoso again, but you can use any binaural renderer that you want. So I'm going to use the decoder here, and that should add that to the setup, and I need to select Dolby Atmos 7.1.4. And that should actually kind of do everything already. So what I now have is the audio is coming out of Apple Music. It's going to be routed into the Loopback device. The Loopback device then sends it back into Reaper, where it's arriving at this track. This then kind of forwards it to the master track. And on the master track, I have the binaural rendering engine. I'm using Virtuoso again. That kind of converts that into something that essentially I or you should be able to hear. So let's go back into our functional testing, and let's see if we are actually getting the appropriate track. So let's just play that here.
Left. Right.
And we can actually see in the Virtuoso
Left
that
surround. Right surround. Left rear surround.
the channels
Right
are
rear
coming
surround.
in at the
Left
correct
top front.
at the
Right
correct spot.
top front. Left top rear. Right top rear.
And the LFE.
Left.
Now I don't have to tell you that if I now press record
Center.
here, then essentially I'm recording that
Left surround.
7.1.4 signal,
Right
and I can
surround.
then essentially kind of use that
Left
in my
rear
track.
surround.
The one thing that I need to point out is that if you're now recording that signal in your digital audio workstation, you're recording it as a 7.1.4 signal. So this is not a Dolby Atmos master file in the strictest sense. It is actually a render of a Dolby Atmos Masterfile in 7.1.4 format. However, for referencing, that is perfectly fine. We don't really need more. We just need to have some understanding about how that commercial track actually kind of positioned objects or positioned sound sources in three-dimensional space, and 7.1.4 is perfectly fine for kind of showing us that. So the last thing I want to point out is that this is indeed an undocumented feature. So if you go into the Dolby Atmos documentation, or if you go into the Apple Music documentation, you will actually see that Dolby Atmos playback is supposed to work on internal speakers on a Mac, which these clearly are not. We're actually using the external output, or through an HDMI output where you can send out Dolby Digital Plus with joint object coding, and this is also clearly not the case here. We're actually using an external output that is just a regular 7.1.4 output. That's all we are going to do. Now, that means that Apple and or Dolby could take this feature away at any moment in time. Now, they have not done so for more than a year, so I'm assuming this is sort of in here intentionally, but we cannot rule out the possibility that this is taken away. Now, what would you do or what should you do if that feature was ever taken out? My personal opinion about that is that if Dolby or Apple ever decide to limit access to this technology to producers and consumers, that's probably going to kind of indicate the end of the technology in general, because why would you limit access to your technology to the very people who are supposed to work with that technology? That would strike me as very, very odd. So my feeling is that the feature is in here intentionally in order to allow access, even though it's not publicly available. But if that access is ever taken away, my feeling is this is really an indication of the end of Dolby Atmos. So if you ever get into the situation that this suddenly doesn't work anymore, my recommendation would be to stop working with Dolby Atmos. So this is really everything I wanted to say today. Thanks again for watching my videos. If you have any questions or comments about anything that I said today, or kind of just general comments about the future of Dolby Atmos, or if this is something that you like or whatever, please use the comment section below or join our Discord community. Invite link is in the description below. And with that being said, see you at the next video.